We're going to take a break from Prime Minister. I want to get to one of the scenarios in it, but let's do supply lines of the American Revolution. This is a game I wanted to I love this. This is so period. Being a game of war, logistics, and deception, and a suitable and commendable pastime for gentlemen and ladies both. Invented by Mr. Tom Russell, a patriot born in these United States, with cartographical embellishments by Ania B. Zielkowska. And that would be the whole title. This whole thing, all of this, would be how titles were recorded for a long time, because we didn't really distinguish like subtitle type things. Whatever you want to call them. Subtitle seems like the right word, but it doesn't tend to have that meaning. Okay, so this is a game, first of all, alright, this is a game focusing on supplies heavily. But behind that, there's a light war game as well, right? One that has military actions, etc. I don't know, maybe as much so as something like Washington's War does. Washington's War worries more about events and political control and everything like that than this one does. I would also compare it to the Milton Bradley Skirmish game. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more complex. Somewhere probably lying between the two of them. It's not a very long rule book. I've been interested in Hollandspiel. I played Westphalia, or the Treaty of Westphalia, or whatever, by them. Every now and then I'll pick something up by them that's like, yeah, they're doing something so interesting here. This is one I had heard good things about. I don't know if it was this one or the Southern one. And I want to kind of look at how it works. And it looks like a fun little simple game. That didn't take long to read the rules. So let's take a look at the components. The map, I find the map very attractive. Actually, I find the graphics in this very attractive across the board, with one exception, which is these little tricorners. Those are the leaders. They don't have any kind of ratings or anything. You have generic leaders that allow you to engage in combat for the most part. But I actually find the troop, I don't know, nothing too fancy, all the same, no problem distinguishing what you're looking at, a nice bold number in it, super thick counters, which I don't really like for most things. These are almost your Quinto size. I don't usually like for most things, but somehow they fit well with this. I don't know. You get a cup full of city names, which are going to be reinforcement locations that are drawn at random for the Patriot player. British reinforcements are handled at their own discretion. They can call on them when they like. When they do so, they end up increasing the amount of cities that they need to have to keep going in the game, essentially. Regular game turn record track, winter turns distinguished in a pretty clear way. This Patriot support chart, it has the information it needs. Pass track, this is handled, it's going to be kind of a pulsed movement type system, and a certain amount of passes in the turn ends between the two players. So, one person can't just keep going forever. You have to pay attention. You got port markers here. These little crowns mean they're victory point locations. These are forts. If they don't have a fort marker and they're these longer boxes, they're cities. I kind of feel like maybe something should have been added for cities beyond that. I don't know. Yeah, it's clear enough. It doesn't cause any difficulty or whatever. The C box is going to handle movements from Nova Scotia. All your reinforcements are going to go into Halifax, whatever, beforehand. And we got these dug-in markers. If you decide to fortify your position, it lasts for a year. And then we have supply markers, and there's just 2 types of supplies in the game. Since it's supply lines, you expect to have some significance on that. These are war supplies. Those are going to be needed for battles. And then these are food supplies, which you're going to need whenever you move an army. Armies are basically any collection of forces. Shall we dig into the rules? Let me get another pipe. Try to light it, have it for about a minute, and then put it down. That's just how we roll. Component-wise, these are the dice that come with the game. Serviceable. Larger than I like, I'll probably swap them out. Grab some gamer's dice or something. The rulebook itself felt understandable, but I don't know. We shall see. We go over the components, the map, whatnot. Oh, I didn't mention these. These are points, just sort of places of no interest, but they represent the terrain and you can fight on them. I don't know what these dots, those might be towns or something, just being represented. I don't think they don't have any impact on the game. You have lines of movement between the different points. What else do we have here? So yeah, the military units have a strength point value. They're like change. You have the little tri-corner hats. Those are the leaders. Any stack of units is considered to be an army, not meant to imply anything about its strength. An impulse allows you to activate an army, moving all units of that army to get either singly or together, which is to say that you can split them up when you move an army. When an army from one side moves into an area occupied by another, a battle will occur. You can only do this if you have a leader and military supplies as well. Armies can carry with them a number of supplies equal to 1 plus the number of units that make up the army. There's no limit to the number of units that make up an army, but the number of units in an army determines how many food supplies, green ones, are needed to activate the army. Each player also has leader units. Leaders are not units. They don't count as such. They're required to activate an army in order to initiate a battle. They can be captured. If at any time either player has no leaders on the map, the player loses the game. With an exception. By the way, the exception is this triumvirate of reputation. When that happens, all the leaders are removed. Seeing this is an exception, rules lawyers. There's a bit of humor in this rulebook, kind of reminiscent of Berg's humor in some ways. It's different, but it's kind of reminds me of him. A fair sprinkling of it throughout, which of course increases my enjoyment. I like a little bit of snark in my rules. Okay, like I said, there's 2 types of food, 2 types of supplies: food, which is green, and war supplies, which are used for combat. Supplies are generated each turn in eligible cities. They can be stored in a city or fort, up to 8 supplies total, and you'll see there's some war supplies in the forts at the beginning of the game. Ticonderoga has 2, highlighting its importance and why the dirty rebels wanted it so bad. They can be stored in a city or fort or carried by an army that occupies a point. This is interesting. Or carried by an army that occupies a point. Now, up here, they say an army can carry with them a certain amount. I don't think that's in addition to what's in the city. I think the army can only carry, or fort. I think the army can only carry supplies on its own when it doesn't have a city to store them in. You'll see it probably doesn't make much difference, but you have to kind of expose your supplies, which is the point. It doesn't feel like it has much about supply lines from reading the rules, but we'll see. Supplies are piece limited. That means if somebody seizes all of one color, boy, you're screwed. The Patriot gets to generate his supplies for cities first if that's an issue, and then the Crown player generates any supplies with leftovers. I don't think that that's a real strategy. I hope it's not, because it would be really weird. Other counters are used to track game functions. Yeah, anything exciting here. There are destroyed city markers. I think those are these X's. On the other side of the dug-in markers, they're indicating cities that can no longer produce supplies. The city still exists for all other purposes, though. Victory points, capacity to hold supplies. Dug-in counters indicate an army that it's improved its defensive position. We got the setup done already. Let's go through the sequence of play. The game's played over a series of game turns, each being a couple months of activity. Game turn goes as follows. First, supplies are generated. Each player, the Crown first, then has an opportunity to move his supplies. The Crown player then has an option to request reinforcements. During winter turns, cities don't produce supplies. Is that true? Yes, it's reinforcements that get produced in the winter. Initiative phase. Each player rolls a die. The high roller will have the first impulse in that impulse phase. The pass marker will be placed at the number, at the highest number of those two. However, if the two are tied, the pass number goes to the 5 or 6 level, which means you can never have a pass number of 1. Then players alternate activating armies in a series of impulses or passing. The impulse phase ends when both players pass consecutively or when the pass marker reaches the last stage of its track. Some housekeeping is done at the end of the turn, and during winter turns, the Continental Army will be disbanded, but then it regrows, so don't worry too much there. The game ends immediately when one of the players meets one of their victory conditions. At the end of the 12th game turn, if no players won the game, both players lose. Again, I don't know what that means. In this, it feels like it is a draw. In some games, notably Republic of Rome comes to mind on this one, Canadian Civil War, both players losing, I feel, has, after the Holocaust, well, maybe not after the Holocaust, but in Republic of Rome and Canadian Civil War, I feel like all players losing has more of a, it's a worse situation than somebody winning and you not being the winner. You know, it depends on how you want to read it into it or whatever. In this, I think it's just, hey, the war's taken too long and the Patriots aren't getting their freedom quickly enough and the Brits aren't able to suppress it, and it's just going to turn into a long slog. All right, I'm going to swap batteries and I'll be back. For those of you who like to track my time for whatever reason, it's got to be about 5 in the morning on Monday. I got a couple hours of sleep, and that I haven't been able to get that much sleep at night most nights, so that's kind of good. I generally sleep during the day. We'll see if I sleep the entire day away. I should actually go shopping, but I'm not going to be able to do it right now. Okay. Supplies. Supplies are the crux of the game. Without them, nothing much happens. During the supply phase of the campaign turn, a city can generate 2 food supplies and 1 war supply, so long as it's occupied by an army. At least 1 point adjacent to the city is either not occupied by any army or is occupied by a friendly army, i.e., it's not completely surrounded by enemy armies. Supplies generated by a city are placed in that city's supply box and stored in the city. Cities can only store 8 supplies. If the supplies generated for that turn would bring the city total to more than 8, it only generates enough to take it up to 8. You have to make some pre-planning based on this. That's kind of painful. Any and all food supplies are generated before any and all war supplies. Cities never generate supplies during a winter game turn. I need to clean my glasses. I'm sorry. Better when I get... when I'm sitting in front of the computer and whatever, I can kind of read everything, see everything I need to pretty easily. when I start reading, the glasses kind of have to be pretty clean. Big conglomerations of dust. Nova Scotia generates supplies during campaign turns, regardless of whether the city is occupied, with the number of supplies being determined by the most recent marker removed from the crown supply thing. For example, once the one crown supply marker is removed, Nova Scotia generates one supply cube each turn. Once the two, it generates two. The crown player chooses freely each turn whether those will be war and or food supplies. This is because Halifax is where everything shipped into, basically, for the war effort. Moving supplies by land. During each supply phase, each player, the crown player first, then the patriot, may move supplies to, from, and through his armies and the cities they occupy. During each player's impulse, in the impulse phase, before, during, and after the impulse, they may likewise move supplies. In all cases, these supplies are moved according to the following rules. Friendly armies that are adjacent to one another form a chain, a supply line. Furthermore, the purposes of moving of supplies, any two friendly armies that are themselves both adjacent to a third army are considered adjacent and thus form part of the same supply line. Yeah, okay. Supplies may be freely exchanged up and down the supply line, like a bucket brigade. When you move the supplies, the player need not respect any limitations as to how many supplies can exist in a single area. It is only when he has finished moving his supplies that the player ensures that he respects the conditions. No city or fort holds more than 8. No army occupying a point has more supplies than it can carry. And because you were in a valid circumstance before you moved your supplies, you will be able to be in one after, right? You may not be able to move things, but moving by sea, moving supplies by sea. Crown armies may move supplies from any one crown-occupied port city to another crown-occupied port city. These cities are adjacent to each other for the purpose of moving supplies. However, supplies may be moved from Nova Scotia but not moved into Nova Scotia. And supplies may only be moved to Quebec from Nova Scotia. Thus, you can't move supplies by sea from any of the American port cities to Quebec and vice versa. Right. Makes sense. And that's because Quebec is sitting on the St. Lawrence and isn't really, you can't easily just shift up, but I don't know. I don't know. Well, leave it be. Leave it be. Stop arguing the point. Okay. City supplies may not be moved into the sea box unless these supplies are being reserved for a bombardment. Let's see another rule. There's no requirement that the sea box be occupied in order to move supplies there. As stated above, any army occupying a point can carry supplies equal to 1 plus the number of units in that army. Leaders do not count. These supplies move with the army when it activates. If the army moves into a friendly or unoccupied fort or city, the supplies are immediately stored in that fort or city. If the activated army attacks an enemy army in a fort or city, it carries and uses those supplies in battle. When an army leaves a fort or city, it may take supplies from that city or fort equal to the amount it could carry. If an army's movement results in a city, fort, or army having more supplies than it can store or carry, the acting player must move supplies along his supply line until everything is copacetic. Sorry, I want to put a P in there for some reason. Always did. If absolutely unable to do so, his opponent may offer suggestions if the acting player is stumped, and the acting player would be obliged to follow those suggestions unless he has something else that could legally be done. I.e., you can't destroy supplies just saying, "Oh, I don't want to move them." You have to expose them, perhaps. Then the supplies must be discarded from the overstacked areas until all limits have been complied with. Now, that is possible, because you could move an army into a city that you own that's already overstacked, and then you have to flow them out. And you may not be able to do that because you no longer have a chain of armies. Which means you're going to need garrisons to protect your supply line in order to move anything. Otherwise, the natives and the locals just eat all your supplies. Bullets. Okay. Expending supplies. Supplies are expended to activate armies and to do battle. Expended supplies are just removed from the area occupied by the army using them and placed away. Supplies are never permanently removed from the game and are returned to the map as needed. Crown reinforcements. At the end of the supply phase, the crown player may request reinforcements by removing the next available reinforcement marker. And the marker is placed in Nova Scotia at the start of the supply phase in the next campaign turn, not winter. He removes the reinforcements counter and places the indicated number of units or leaders in Nova Scotia. The crown player may take only one marker per turn. There's a special one, the Triumvirate of Reputation, which is not part of the usual sequence and may be taken instead. Its resolution is treated in detail. During the initiative phase, each player rolls a die. The high roller wins initiative and will go first. Put the pass marker in the space of the pass track, corresponding to the highest die roll result. If the players roll the same, when the Patriot has not yet declared independence, which is getting to this point, the Crown player wins initiative. If the Patriot has declared independence, the Patriot player gets the initiative. The pass marker ends up in the 5 or 6 space on a tie roll. The pass marker will thus never start in 1. Yeah, I already said that, because that just reminded me. We're not seeing a lot of comedy here. I think a little bit more happens later. During the impulse phase, players alternate impulses, beginning with the player who won initiative. During the impulse, players may either activate an army or pass. I mean, I'm not expecting it to be, a humor book, but yeah, I kind of remember there being a few. That's why I mentioned it when I saw the one. If he passes, he slides the pass marker 1 space back on the pass track. If the pass marker is now on 0, the impulse ends, or the impulse phase ends. Both players pass consecutively, the pass marker is automatically moved to 0, i.e. they don't want to do anything. So you can't kind of try to time it so you just get the last action and don't have to do anything at any other time. An army may be activated for one and only one of the following during an impulse, and it must be able to pay the cost and supply. March, transport, attack, skirmish, dig in, bombard, and destroy. There's no limit to the number of times an army can be activated in a game turn. During any non-passing impulse, the acting player may freely move supplies before and or after activating his army. When an army is activated to march, all units in that army are moved directly to any friendly or unoccupied adjacent areas. Patriot and Crown units both may utilize movement lines to move from one area to the next. For every 4 units in the army, rounding up, it's going to cost you 1 food to activate the army. So 5 units would cost you 2 food to move. Units belonging to the activated army may all move together, or they can split into other armies, moving to different areas or staying in the same place, whatever. However, it all counts as being activated. You still have to spend the supplies for the entire army if you're moving anything out of that area. The exception is when a leader is present in the army. When a leader is present, the acting player has the option of only activating those units that he will actually move. Thus, you can reduce your food cost for moving the army. That's going to be a hard one to remember. There's not a lot to this game, but that one, in terms of roles, but that one, it's kind of tricky to remember. Okay. Leaders move. I wonder what's going on. Something triggered, and there's no car or anybody out there or anything. Oh, no, a car went by. Okay. Something triggered my neighbor's, automatic garage light. And if I don't see a car, I always wonder if there's, an animal out there or something, because I might see something I wouldn't normally see. Okay. Mainly, I'm wondering if there are raccoons up here. I really don't know if there are. I've never seen one up here, but I'd be surprised if there aren't. I've seen possums. They come out during daylight. Where am I? Leaders move with their army during a march activation. When an activated army splits into multiple armies, the leaders can move or stay with whatever. If an army enters a friendly area, The units from the two armies then form a larger single army. If both armies have a leader, one leader is subordinated to the other. You have an option on a future activation of splitting up the army with each leader attached to a different new army. Yeah, nothing exciting there. A marching army can never enter an enemy-occupied area. That's an attack. Okay, the transport action. This allows a crown army, with or without their leader, occupying a port city to move all or some of its units into the sea box, or for all or some of the crown units occupying the sea box to move from one friendly or vacant to one friendly or vacant port city. This does not cost any supplies, and further, these units can't carry supplies with them. This is something interesting. The Patriots can't just stock supplies in places that are like uninhabited, that are ports, because the Brits can just move in and take that port very easily. Well, they have to have something in the sea box. It takes 2 activations, so yeah, you might have a chance to get out of there once you're threatened. This doesn't cost any supplies, and further, these units cannot carry supplies with them, i.e. why you can't put supplies at sea. Attack with leaders only. An attack activation allows an army with a leader to move into an adjacent enemy-occupied area, initiating a battle. Only an army with a leader may be activated to attack. Oh, the other thing I have to remember, another weird little thing, is it doesn't cost supplies to go to sea. Or to come, like movement to and from sea doesn't cost any supplies. That's important. An attack activation allows any army to move to an adjacent enemy-occupied area, initiating a battle. Only an army with a leader may be activated to attack. As with March activation, it has to spend one food supply for every 4 units. Remember, it has to have a leader, so only those units that are actually going to attack are activated, and any units left behind in the original area are not considered activated, i.e. you don't have to pay for them. Additionally, the army must have enough war supplies to earn at least 1 battle die. I think that's 1. The units activated for the attack move with their leader to the same adjacent enemy-occupied area, no splitting up, which initiates a battle. They may therefore not split into multiple areas. Yeah. I add my editorials, and then they're covered anyway. If the original army has more than 1 leader, only 1 leader is required to move with the activated units to mount the attack. A player must have more than 1 leader, may have more than 1 leader move together at the same stack to make an attack, but you can't use 2 leaders in a single activation to make multiple attacks. It's kind of iffy to send 2 leaders into a battle, because you could conceivably lose both of them, but on the other hand, leaving them behind might be more dangerous. Note that an army in a sea box cannot attack and can never enter an enemy-occupied port. They say port city. I would say it applies to port points, too. And port forts. Skirmish. Okay, the Patriot Army has a special ability to skirmish. If they have no more than 2 units, and remember, you can declare these on their own, like they can be part of something else, may be activated to skirmish if they are adjacent to an enemy army that occupies a point. An army activated to skirmish is moved to the enemy-occupied point. Only a point. You can't attack a city or fort. And initiates a special kind of one-sided battle called a skirmish. It's basically a raid type thing. The army expends 1 food supply for this activation. If the army does not have a leader, it must only consist of 1 or 2 units. If it does have a leader, the leader can activate 1 or 2 of those units to skirmish. At the completion of the skirmish, unlike a standard battle, the Patriot units are returned to their original location, and in the case of a skirmish activation by a leader, they rejoin their original army. Dig in. An army in a city or fort that is activated to dig in is covered by the dug in marker for the remainder of the game turn. They are dug in. They can't be activated for the remainder of the game turn. They cannot refuse battle, but they ignore 1 hit in the battle as a bonus. The army has to expend a food supply and a war supply for this activation. This is not affected by the number of units or leaders in the army. Bombard. Crown can only do this with a leader. Supplies moved to the sea box are reserved for bombardment. A bombard activation allows a crown army with a leader to target 1 port city or port point, but not port fort, apparently, occupied by the Patriot player. This costs all war supplies in the C box. The crown player then rolls 1 die for each war supply expended, and for each die on a 1, they destroy a Patriot unit of in the target area. Digging has no effect on bombardment. Note that for a crown army in the C box to be transported to a port city, it cannot contain any Patriot units. This is... yeah. Okay. I don't see a limitation. Like, I think you could send one, from what I'm reading here, you could send 1 strength point into a C box with a bunch of supplies and bombard the shit out of a place with that. We'll see if there's any anything that changes that. But it looks like, yeah, however many war supplies you send, that's how much you bombard. Now, bombard the shit out of is pretty limited. You only get 1 in 6 hits. If all Patriot units are eliminated and there is a Patriot leader, the leader is evacuated, the Patriot player moves it to a friendly army. Destroy. The crown can do this. A crown army can be activated to destroy a city if it occupies the city and the city is not a victory city. It costs 2 war supplies to destroy a city. It's marked with a destroyed marker. That city will produce no supplies for the remainder of the game, but it can still store them, and they still provide a defensive bonus. At the instant the city is destroyed, the support marker is moved 1 space further right, closer to the Treaty of Alliance. This is important because, yeah, you're cutting Patriot, cities that you're cutting off, you're destroying what may be potential Patriot supply sources, or likely Patriot supply sources, probably, if you're going to do this, but the cost of it is the public will, or the public perception within stuff. I'm going to pause a little here at battle. I feel like sitting and having a smoke while I watch a video for a little bit. I'll be back down. We're taking things much more... this is a rule book, like when I first sat down, or when I first started describing things, I was thinking, I might be able to do this all in one video, but I've already cut the video once because my battery ran out soon before I started actually getting into the rules. So, yeah, I'm too psyched to go on to... it's gone for maybe 10 minutes. Just didn't want to watch video. A little bit of raid, but not much. Okay, normally an attack activation causes a battle. The attacking army is the attacker, or the acting army, while the enemy army is the defender. Battle is resolved by doing the following. The defender first has the option to refuse a battle if eligible. If he does this, and it will be a withdrawal, no battle takes place and the acting player's impulse ends. Then the attacking army expends war supplies to earn dice. The defender expends war supplies to earn dice. The defender rolls his battle dice, inflicting hits on the attacker. This may cause a reduction in the number of dice the attacker actually rolls. The attacker then rolls its battle dice, inflicting hits on the defender. The side with the most units after the battle is done is the victor. If the attacker wins, the defender must make a morale check to determine whether it retreats or stands. Okay, accepting or refusing battle. If there's an adjacent, friendly, or unoccupied area, not counting the area from which the attacker launched his attack, an army that refuses battle moves into that area with all its units moving and all moving into the same area. It does not expend supplies. An army may not move it into the C box when refusing battle. Typically, an army that refuses battle does not take any supplies with it, but rather abandons them to the enemy. The exception is if the army has a leader, in which case it may take supplies equal to half the number of units of the army rounded down. And just units don't count leaders. When an army refuses battle, no further battle steps are resolved. The attacker automatically occupies the area it was attacking. If the army cannot refuse battle or chooses not to, they instead accept battle, and the players move on to the attack commitment. For attacker commitment, the attacker must expend war supplies to earn battle dice. If he's attacking a point, he earns 1 battle die for each war supply expended. If he's attacking a city or fort, he gets 1 for every 2 war supplies expended. This is the defensive bonus. And as to rounding, the crown player always rounds up. The patriot always rounds down. And this is the humor point that I remember. So maybe don't overspend. You know, I mean, like you would never actually do it, right? The attacker must have and expend enough war supplies to earn at least 1 battle die in order to be activated for an attack. The defender may, but is not required to expend war supplies to earn dice. Each war supply expended earns 1 battle die. The defender rolls his die. For each 1 or 2, a unit from the attacker's army is eliminated. Remove it from the map. For every 2 attacker units eliminated, the attacker's number of battle dice is reduced by 1. They still spend the war supplies for it. And here's the thing. It's not like you're wiping out units that weren't prepared, that weren't armed and ready to fight. You're wiping out the units he intended to engage, so you can't like say, oh, I didn't have that many, right? Note this. You just get points for the supplies you expend again, just like with the sea bombardment. It's how well you equip your armies. It's not how big your army is. Now, you win the battle by having a larger force at the end, which means that bringing a lot of troops in can help drive the enemy away. All right, the attacker then rolls his battle dice. Each Patriot army eliminates a Crown unit for every 1 or 2, same as defense, but each attacking Crown army unit eliminates a Patriot for every 1, 2, or 3. And in either case, the first hit scored is disregarded if the defender is dug in. Remember, that was the advantage for being dug in. Count the number of units and leaders for each army. The army with the highest combined total of units and leaders achieves a victory. Okay, so here the leader does count as an extra unit, essentially. If there's a tie, the defender achieves victory. When the Patriot leader is the attacker and one of his armies achieves victory, the support marker is advanced 1 space towards the Treaty of Alliance, the Saratoga effect. When the Patriot player's defending army has a leader and the Crown army achieves a victory, the support marker is moved 1 space away from the Treaty of Alliance. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Like, I know the game effect. I'm trying to think of the linkage. Like, you know, Washington's retreat from New York. Did that really hurt the Patriot cause? Maybe. Okay. Okay. We just read that, right? No. Yeah, we just read that. All right, if the defender achieves a victory, the attacking army is moved back to the area it began the impulse in. Any supplies it carries are given to the defender. The defender doesn't have to worry about supply limits until it's his impulse, so he's able to overstack briefly. If the attacker achieves victory, the defender must make one of 2 morale choices. A morale check consists of rolling a die. If the result meets or exceeds the difference between the number of units and leaders of the 2 armies, the check is passed. Otherwise, it's failed and the defender must retreat. The Crown player makes 1 morale check. The Patriot has to make 2. If either check fails, he must retreat. If the battle is being fought at a point, the check is automatically failed. Save your wrist trouble. No need to roll a die. Another one. Okay. If the check is passed, the defender stands. The attacker must move back just as if the defender had achieved a victory, but he takes his supplies with him. If the check has failed, the defender must retreat. He must move his army to an adjacent friendly or unoccupied area. The defender may not retreat into the sea box. The defending army takes no supplies with it, instead abandoning them all to the attacker. No leadership bonus there, etc. If there is no valid place for the defender to retreat, the army surrenders. Eliminate all units in the army. Eliminate any leader piece for that army. If a Crown leader is eliminated, advance the support marker towards the Treaty of Alliance. If a Patriot is eliminated, move the marker 1 space away from the Treaty of Alliance. But see 11.1. Yes, that's the limitation. Once the Declaration of Independence is created, you're on the bottom row. If If a Crown army surrenders, advance the support marker 1 space towards Treaty of Alliance. If a Patriot army surrenders, move the marker 1 space away from the Treaty of Alliance again. If all units for one side are eliminated, they automatically surrender, ending the battle immediately, and any leaders are eliminated as well. What does it mean that they automatically surrender? It means you trigger the point bonuses there. Okay. Skirmish battle. When the Patriot activates an army for skirmish, a skirmish battle ensues. The defender cannot refuse battle and does not earn any dice. The attacking Patriot player expends war supplies to earn dice on a 1-for-1 basis. Recall that a skirmish activation can only target a point. The attacker rolls his dice, eliminating a Crown unit for each 1 or 2. Again, note, it doesn't seem to be limited to the number of units that you're sending in. The attacker then moves back to his original area, regardless of what happened to the area the skirmish was counted against. This is a very interesting thing. Like, the number of troops you have doesn't affect your ability to cause casualties. It is the amount of supplies that you're using. During the end, it feels very much like the firepower era, at least the theory behind it in World War I. During the turn-end phase, the Crown player checks for victory. All dug-in markers are removed. The Continental Army disbands. Winter turns only. Patriot reinforcements are mustered, except in the last 4 turns of the game. Once you hit these, it's marked no Patriot reinforcements. Oh, the game turn marker is advanced unless it's the last turn of the game. To muster reinforcements, the Patriot player must first consult the current position of the support marker on its track. The number above that space, 2, 3, 4, 5, Treaty of Alliance has reinforcements, interesting, will indicate the number of reinforcement markers he may draw blindly from the cup. Each reinforcement marker he draws will indicate the name of a city. If that city is Patriot occupied or vacant, the Patriot player places 2 new units there. If the city is Crown occupied, the Patriot player places no units there, and the marker counts as being drawn. Drawn markers are set aside, but may re-enter the cup when the Continental Army disbands. Markers only re-enter the cup during disbanding. If the cup is empty when the Patriot player attempts to draw, he gets nothing until it disbands. During the last 4 turns of the game, the Patriot player will not get any reinforcements. Not even French, because we're too far north. There are 2 winter turns in the game. And by the way, the Treaty of Alliance is the alliance with the French, right? We're looking at just the first couple of years of the war. 3 years if you count 75, but yeah. So it's a very limited thing. I'm intrigued by the idea of something like this that covered the whole war. Like, I feel so limited by this snapshot. And it's one of my kind of grumps about it. It's like, I am looking still for that whole war, Revolutionary War game. So far, 1776 may be the best that I've seen. And, you know, for some of you who love that game, that's great. For me, I'm not that impressed by it. Like, I'm debating it up against Washington's War, which I feel is incredibly, you know, my viewpoint of Washington's War is it has so many flaws and whatnot. Historical accuracy-wise, I feel like it's about the same as Skirmish, the Milton Bradley thing. And it's like, I'm just missing that game that really, really drives the War of American Revolution. Now, I do have, End of Empire? I really ought to play that sometime. And I also have 13 The Colonies in Revolt, which has not hit it for me, but I don't know. You know, it's not like 1776 has either. So there we have it. But yeah, I'm lacking anything that feels particularly good. I've stayed away from the coin game on it. First of all, I just don't feel like a coin game is gonna do it for me completely. Like, I want more detail on the military than coin is going to give. Coin is going to give something. They're interesting games. I like them competitively. I like especially Andean Abyss and the one that I don't have, A Distant Plain. I think those are my favorite too, as sort of the purest coin games. But anyway, where are we? We're in the winter phase here. Cities don't generate supplies during the supply phase of a winter. Each side is limited to one attack activation for the entirety of the game turn. A skirmish activation counts as their sole attack for this purpose. The Continental Army will disband at the end of the turn phase, turn end phase. That sounds really horrible. It's not as bad as it sounds. We'll get to that. During the turn end phase, each winter turn, the Continental Army disbands and units are removed from the board. Patriot armies with a leader lose half their units rounded down. Yeah, Valley Forge was nasty. Patriot Army, and if you look at these 2 years, yeah, the army was pretty much gone afterwards. Patriot armies in a victory city lose all but 2 of their units, unless there's a leader, in which case, follow the previous case. All other Patriot armies, though, are entirely removed. Any supplies that they were carried are lost. Discard them. Remove any food supplies held in a city or fort that was occupied by these specific armies. This is weird. War supplies remain in place. Because if you're in a victory city, I didn't realize that. I thought I'd be safe in a city. Okay. This is not considered elimination or surrender. They're just going home, i.e. no tracks on there, no points on the track. The Patriot player then examines the reinforcement markers that were drawn in the previous campaign turns. If the city represented is crown occupied, the reinforcement marker is returned to the box. It will never re-enter the cup. All other reinforcement markers will be placed back in the cup. Recall that the next step in the turn end phase process is for the Patriot player to muster new reinforcements. The same procedure is followed as in a campaign turn, with 2 important wrinkles. The Patriot player draws 2 additional markers from the cup. For example, if he could normally draw 3, he draws 5. How many do I normally draw? Based on there. Yeah, okay. Things just aren't sticking. That's one of the problems. I read it at all. Each section that I read made sense, but I didn't feel like I had a real grasp of it, and I still don't. Like, sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. I don't think it's the rules' fault. I think it's my faulty mind. Okay. During the first winter phase, the Patriot player receives his 3rd leader. Place it with the army. During the first winter phase. Let me just put that there. That'll help remind me. Note that the second winter turn is the last turn in which the Patriot player gets any reinforcements at all, though. Why is that? I'm not sure entirely. Like, I don't feel like in 1777 there wasn't still continual reinforcements coming in. Patriot support track. This abstracts not only the process of winning French support for the war effort, but also the support for the cause among the colonials. Certain actions will cause the support marker to advance towards the Treaty of Alliance and gain victory for the Patriots, and certain actions will cause it to regress. Okay, it moves to the right when the Patriot is victorious in battle, a Crown army surrenders, a Crown leader surrenders, the Crown player destroys a city, requests reinforcements. The first time in the game that the Patriot player attacks Quebec. This is new. All the others we had talked about. During each turn end phase in which the Patriot player occupies Quebec. Okay, so this is the Arnold expedition into Canada, which was kind of a failure, but an interesting part of the war. The marker regresses when the Crown player is victorious in battle, when he is attacking a Patriot army that has a leader. Very, very specific there. A Patriot army surrenders, a Patriot leader surrenders. During the end turn phase, in which a Crown army occupies Philadelphia as the seat of the government. I thought that was only after the Declaration of Independence, but okay. Declaration of Independence. When the marker advances to the first Declaration of Independence space, the colonials declare their independence. Each Patriot-occupied city immediately generates 2 war supplies. They melt down their bells. For the remainder of the game, the Patriot player wins ties for initiative. For the remainder of the game, the support marker can never regress beyond the first of these spaces, i.e. it'll never move back to the previous row. You declare independence, you can't go back. Sounds like a W thing to say. The crown player may win the game if, during any turn end phase, he occupies all 3 of the following after the declaration. New York, Albany, and Philadelphia. That's what I was remembering. Treaty of Alliance. The instant that the support marker hits the final Treaty of Alliance phase, the game ends in a Patriot victory. Hooray! Crown Expectations. Running parallel to the reinforcement spaces on the Crown Victory reinforcement track are the victory conditions for the Crown player. Now note, these are just the number on the chit, which has been explained already. It's this that's the expectations. At the beginning of the game, he's required to capture 3 victory cities, and starts with 2 of them, Boston and Quebec. When the Crown player removes a reinforcement marker from the track, replacing it in Nova Scotia at the end of the supply phase, the number of victory conditions he's required to capture may increase. The presence of an asterisk in this area of the track indicates that the requisite number of victory cities must be held by the end of the last campaign turn of the current year. Otherwise, the Crown player loses the game. So if you reach here, if you take that 4th reinforcement, you have to take the maximum number of victory point cities by the end of that year, or you just lose. Note this also causes the support marker to advance. So this is interesting. If you keep your... So this isn't an auto victory. This is at the end of the game. But there is an auto victory, which is New York and Albany, and the Declaration of Independence has not occurred. New York, Albany, and Philadelphia once it's occurred. But the non-automatic is you make it to the end of the game and you have the number of victory cities required. But if you hit this before the 77 turn, if you take your reinforcements too quickly, you have to get the 5 victory cities. Now, what are those victory cities? New York, Philadelphia, New York. That's 3. Boston, Albany, and Quebec. And again, I got 2 of them already. But there aren't a lot of British troops on the board. There really aren't. I got 4 here in Boston. I got 4 up here in Quebec. 2 in Montreal. Obviously nothing in Ticonderoga because it just surrendered. And then we take a look at what the Patriots are. A few more, I think. It's close. It's real close. I think I have 2 more Patriot armies. Or forces. Strength points, whatever you want to call it. I need to swap batteries. That's either done or not. Okay. Now we go further in this, and it explains it better, probably. See, the thing that weirds me out is when it says something like, at the end of the supply phase, the number of victory points he is required to capture may increase. That's the amount he has to have at the end of the game, not at the end of the supply phase, which feels a little fuzzy. The presence of an asterisk indicates the requisite number must be held at the end of the last campaign turn of the given year. Otherwise, the Crown player loses the game. Yeah, but you don't have to have it until the end of the game. If and when the Crown player removes the Triumvirate of Reputation marker from Nova Scotia, having moved it there from a reinforcement track, he must first remove all his current leaders from the map, then place 3 leaders in Nova Scotia. These leaders may only exit the Nova Scotia area if they're attached to armies. This changes his whole, situation. Note that taking this chit from the turn from the track increases the victory city requirement by 1. So if you're required to hold 4 cities, you would now be required to hold 5. Why would you do this? I don't really know why you'd do that. Other than to retreat your leaders. It just doesn't seem like it does much. Let me see. Crown reinforcements. Yeah. I think it would be a pretty bad idea to do this unless you absolutely have to. Now, if you've lost a couple of leaders, this can reinforce. This can bring all your leaders back. So at least there's that. There are multiple ways for each player to win the game. The Patriot player, because losing all your leaders is a loss condition. The Patriot player wins if the Crown player has no leaders left on map. The support marker is advanced to the final Treaty of Alliance space if the Crown player has taken a 4th and final reinforcement ship from his track and fails to achieve victory before the last campaign turn of the year in which the ship was removed. Crown player wins if the Patriot has no leaders left on the map. At the end of the game, the Crown has control of victory cities equal to the number indicated on the reinforcements track. Or during an turn-end phase, the Crown has control of New York and Albany, and the Declaration of Independence has not yet occurred, or New York, Albany, and Philadelphia if it has. If neither player has won by the end of the final game turn, neither player wins. Semicolon, both lose. I don't know what that means. It's like, it says draw here. Therefore, both players should keep their victory conditions in mind and push hard for them, only passing when it is to their benefit. Okay, concession. A single mistake, this is one that bothers me. A single mistake, if possibly exploited by your opponent, can render your position untenable and the game unwinnable. In a friendly game, it is common to concede the game to your opponent rather than play it out to its conclusion. I would actually say the opposite. In an unfriendly game, it is more likely that you would see a concession. Which is to say, if you're playing competitively, that's when you are more likely to just say, you know what, I got no chance. I'm just trying to win this game, And moreover, let's say you're sitting around just kind of enjoying having shits and giggles. You're getting your ass kicked. There may not be time to do anything else. Well, it's a friendly game. I don't mind continuing. So I would actually say in an unfriendly game. I mean, I can't think of anything where it would be like, we're just playing incredibly competitively. We don't like each other. We, in fact, probably are disliking each other because we are unfriendly to one another. And you wouldn't accept a concession. That sounds really miserable. I mean, it's like, great. Anyway, that one just really struck me. Anyhow, that's the rules for supply lines of the American Revolution Northern Theater. I assume the rules are pretty close to the Southern Theater one. I don't know I can't see how you would link them. I think actually the middle states are kind of left out. But I'm intrigued by it and kind of wonder if you could do something that was this kind of level that covered the entire war. But obviously this is not going to scratch the peculiar itch that I have. But it may be a fun game, and it should be fairly short. And I'm kind of looking forward to it because, there's something kind of charming about the lighter war game type stuff. I don't know. I don't get the feeling that this is going to bust my brain. I may make some really bad, boneheaded decisions, but I also think that, there's something kind of relaxing about playing these as opposed to the things where I have to worry too much about the rolls. Of course, I'm probably going to make mistakes anyway and all that. But yeah, when these work, I find them very much that kind of comfort food. Maybe this is going to enter. I'm not going to get to play it enough. I was going to say maybe it's going to enter my comfort food collection, but really nothing sits in that anymore, right? Like, but I get the feeling this would have if I had picked it up. I don't know when, back in the '90s. anytime after that. Anytime after that, I was either like I got La Grande Guerre in that period. I was either not really gaming and not really in the hobby very much. Yes, I did a little bit until maybe whatever 2005 or whatever, but then when I came back, the videos started taking over everything, and also all the new purchases and all that, and it was like, wow, now I just have like constantly a huge backlog of games that I need to video. But yeah, we're interested in seeing how this plays out, how it feels to me. So far, it looks good.